My name is Narissa White, and I was 32 years old the day my family decided the internet should help them humiliate me. I remember exactly where I was sitting when it happened. On the curb outside our apartment. The concrete was still warm from the afternoon sun, pressing through the thin fabric of my jeans. I had my knees pulled in close, not for comfort, but because exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. In front of me, my daughter crouched low, tongue between her teeth, dragging a piece of blue chalk across the pavement as if the crooked rainbow she was drawing might somehow hold the world together. I didn't know anyone was watching. I didn't know someone had taken a photo. I found out when my phone vibrated against my palm. At first, I thought it was nothing, a random notification, a tag from someone I barely spoke to anymore. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name attached to it. My sister. My older sister. And beneath her name was a caption that made my chest tighten so suddenly I had to stop breathing for a second. When mistakes raise mistakes. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering as if the words might rearrange themselves if I looked long enough. I refreshed the page. Once, twice, 3 times. My brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. But it didn't change. There I was, tagged. My full name lit up in blue, and worse, my daughter's face was clear as day. The photo wasn't flattering. I looked worn down. My hair was pulled back in a messy knot, dark circles bruising the skin under my eyes. My daughter was barefoot, chalk dust smeared on her knees, completely unaware she was being turned into a punchline. The comments started rolling in before I could even process the caption. Someone I went to high school with, classic Narissa. My aunt chimed in next. Well, what did you expect? A neighbor I barely knew added, this is just sad. Then came the laughing emojis, the sarcastic bless her heart replies, the likes. Dozens of them, including from my mother and my father. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but in a quiet, sinking way. They weren't scrolling past it. They weren't staying neutral. They were participating. They were agreeing. Inside the apartment, my daughter laughed at something on the TV. A cartoon jingle floated through the open window, bright and cheerful, and painfully out of place. She had no idea the word mistake was being wrapped around her existence by the people who were supposed to love her without conditions. My hands started shaking as I scrolled. That's when I saw my cousin Natalie's comment. She's my cousin. This is what happens when you treat family like crap and expect handouts. That one landed harder than the rest, because I knew exactly where it was coming from. 2 weeks earlier, my sister had called me crying, saying she needed money. Not for groceries, not for rent, for a car. She said she needed it to get to work. She promised it would be temporary, swore she'd pay me back this time. She always said this time. I told her no, not because I didn't want to help, but because the last time I helped her, she stole from me. $600, straight from my debit card. I hadn't even noticed right away. I found out at the grocery store when my card was declined, the cashier looking at me like I'd done something wrong. I went home confused, checked my account, and saw the withdrawal. I didn't confront her immediately. I gave her time. I waited for her to come clean. She never did. So I did something I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I gathered proof, I transferred the money back, and I called the police. The fallout was immediate. Overnight, I went from victim to villain. Heartless, selfish, cold. How could I do that to my own sister? Now, staring at my phone while strangers and relatives laughed at my child, everything snapped into place. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't thoughtless. This was revenge, calculated, personal, and cruel. And my entire family lined up behind it. Everyone, except one person. My husband, or rather, the man I was in the middle of divorcing. We'd been separated for 6 months, living apart, barely speaking. The paperwork was supposed to be finalized next month. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, hadn't seen his name pop up on my phone at all. And yet, out of nowhere, he posted something of his own. I didn't know what it was yet. I only knew that my phone buzzed again, and this time, the silence on the other end of the screen felt different. Heavier, like the air right before a storm finally breaks. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over the screen, my stomach tightening like it already knew whatever waited on the other side would change things. The comments on my sister's post were still rolling in, still cruel, still loud. My parents' likes were still there. The humiliation was still very much alive. Then I tapped. It wasn't a comment. It was a photo, posted from his account. No caption, no explanation, no dramatic wording to soften the blow. Just an image. My sister, in broad daylight, walking through a gas station parking lot, her hand tangled with a man who was very clearly not her husband. The angle wasn't flattering. There was no way to explain it away as accidental. Their fingers were laced. Her head was tilted toward him, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Comfortable, intimate, familiar. I felt something strange rise in my chest. Not joy, not satisfaction. Something darker, quieter. A laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it, not because it was funny, but because it was perfect. Clean, undeniable, and devastating in a way no caption ever could be. Within minutes, the internet detonated. Likes multiplied, comments stacked on top of each other. People tagged friends, cousins, co-workers. Someone wrote, "Isn't that the guy she used to babysit for?" Another asked, "Wait, isn't he married?" And then silence. Not the kind where a post fades into obscurity. The kind where everyone sees it, and no one knows what to say next. I refreshed my sister's original post. Natalie's comment was gone. My uncle's rant disappeared. Even my mom's vanished. But I knew better than to mistake that for regret. She wasn't sorry. She was embarrassed. They all were. The spotlight had turned. That night, I didn't eat. I couldn't. My stomach was twisted tight between anger and relief. I had spent the entire day being publicly humiliated, watching my child dragged into something she didn't understand. And in one silent post, the balance shifted. I finally recognized the man in the photo. His name was Mark. He was married, 2 kids. I'd met his wife once at a birthday party years ago. Back then, my sister used to babysit for them. I hadn't even known they were still in contact. But there they were, hand in hand, like consequences didn't exist. I didn't message my husband. I didn't thank him. I didn't ask where the photo came from. I just watched as the internet did what it always does when truth finally slips through a crack. By morning, reality hit. At 7:42 a.m., my phone rang. It was my sister's husband. I hesitated before answering. When I finally did, he didn't bother with hello. "Did you post it?" he demanded. "No," I said honestly. A pause, then quieter. "You're sure?" "Yes." He hung up. An hour later, I found out he packed a suitcase, took their son, and left. No screaming, no confrontation, just gone. At 10:13 a.m., my sister showed up at my house. She didn't knock at first. She paced on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, waving her free hand like she was already in the middle of a screaming match. I watched through the peephole, heart pounding, praying my daughter wouldn't wander into the hallway. Then the banging started. She shouted my name, called me a coward, said I destroyed her life, that I should be proud of myself. I didn't open the door. 5 minutes later, the family group chat exploded. My mom, my dad, Natalie, even my aunt from Florida, who hadn't said a word when my child was mocked, suddenly found her voice. "You crossed a private line. This is sick. Family business shouldn't be aired online." I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't commented. Then my husband finally did, from his own account, under the photo. One sentence. "Maybe next time, think before calling someone's child a mistake." That was it. No hashtags, no explanations. Chaos followed. Screenshots spread, not just of his post, but of hers. The original photo, the caption, the comments, the likes, the timeline laid out in brutal clarity. And this time, the sympathy shifted. Messages started coming in, some from acquaintances, some from complete strangers. "I can't believe your own family did that to you. You handled that better than I ever could." I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, the house unnaturally quiet. And for the first time in months, I thought about my husband. Not as the man I was divorcing, but as the man who had just stood between me and a mob. He had never done that during our marriage. He'd always been quiet, steady, distant. I used to think that meant he didn't care. Now, I wasn't so sure. That afternoon, a text came through. "If you want to talk, I'm here. Just say when." I stared at it for a long time, knowing something had shifted, whether I was ready for it or not. And I was wrong to think that would be the end of it. My family wasn't finished. I should have known better than to believe silence meant surrender. The next morning, I had just dropped my daughter off at school. She'd skipped ahead of me toward the building, backpack bouncing, completely unaware that the world she trusted had tried to turn her into a punchline less than 24 hours earlier. I waited until she disappeared through the doors before letting my shoulders sag. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, my chest felt tight for reasons I couldn't yet name. Then I heard the first car, the crunch of tires on gravel, then another, and another. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I looked through the front window. My heart stopped. My sister's car sat crooked at the curb. Behind it was my parents' sedan, then my aunt and uncle, And, of course, Natalie, who never got out of bed before noon unless there was drama waiting for her. They weren't calm. They weren't hesitant. They were furious. My sister marched up the porch first, pounding on the door like she owned the place. She screamed my name, her voice sharp and frantic, accusing me of ruining her life, of humiliating her, of destroying her family. I froze in the hallway. I didn't want a scene. Not here. Not where my neighbors could see. Not where my daughter would later ask why the police were outside our house. I thought about calling the cops. I didn't. I waited, hoping, stupidly, that they'd get tired and leave. They didn't. My mother joined in next, shouting through the door that I had crossed a line, that I had embarrassed the family, that I needed to come outside and fix this. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes down. He didn't stop her. He never did. Then my aunt started banging a broomstick against the window like it was a joke, like this was some twisted family reunion instead of an ambush. My sister screamed that I had to delete the photo immediately, that I had ruined her marriage, that she hadn't even cheated. "It was a misunderstanding," she yelled. "You did this out of spite." Spite. After she'd called my child a mistake. I stayed silent. They didn't. They demanded an apology. Said my husband had gone too far. Said I'd let him humiliate my own blood. When I still didn't respond, the anger turned physical. The garden gnome my daughter painted last summer shattered against the concrete. The ceramic bird feeder from my grandmother's funeral was knocked down and stomped into pieces. That was when I reached for my phone. My fingers were shaking as I dialed his number. Before the call could connect, another car pulled up. I recognized the truck immediately. My husband stepped out like he wasn't walking into chaos at all. Calm, steady, unhurried. He moved past my father, who tried to stop him, and up the porch steps without saying a word. My sister rushed him, getting inches from his face, accusing him of stalking her, hacking her phone, ruining her life. He didn't respond. Not at first. He just looked at her with that same unreadable expression he always had when he was angry, but refused to show it. Then he knocked on the door. I opened it. He stepped inside and closed it behind him, holding it shut when my sister tried to follow. The shouting continued outside, muffled but relentless. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. He looked around like he hadn't been there in years. His eyes landed on the photos still hanging on the wall, most of them dusty. Our first camping trip. Our daughter's kindergarten graduation. Nothing recent, nothing happy. He pulled out his phone and held it up. "It's up to you," he said evenly. "I can leave it up, or I can take it down." I looked at the screen. The post was still live. Comments still pouring in. People arguing now, some defending me, others saying family drama shouldn't be public. But no one defended my sister. No one. "Delete it," I said. He nodded and did it immediately. No argument, no hesitation. It didn't matter anyway. Everyone had already seen it. The pounding on the door started again, louder this time. I heard glass breaking. Someone knocked over the recycling bins. My mom screamed that she'd sue us, that I'd lost my mind. My husband opened the door. He stepped outside alone and closed it behind him. I couldn't hear everything he said, but I saw enough. My mother's face went red. My sister froze mid-rant. Natalie lowered her phone. My aunt went silent. My father looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. My husband never raised his voice. He said a few quiet words. And just like that, it stopped. One by one, they backed away. No apologies, no explanations, just slamming car doors and bitter glares. My mother was the last to leave, staring at the house like it had personally betrayed her. When my husband came back inside, I didn't ask what he'd said. I didn't need to. We sat at the kitchen table while he made coffee and I picked up the broken pieces of the bird feeder. Something had shifted. The man I thought was emotionally unavailable had just stood up to my entire family, calm, steady, unshaken. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure everything between us had been wrong. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter, just lighter. Like something heavy had been dragged out of the rooms and dumped onto the curb with the broken gnome and shattered bird feeder. I swept up the ceramic pieces while my husband rinsed 2 mugs in the sink, neither of us speaking. It wasn't awkward. It was careful. Like we were both afraid that saying the wrong thing might undo whatever fragile truce had formed between us. He left shortly after, saying he'd check in later. That night I barely slept. My phone stayed face down on the nightstand, but it still felt loud, vibrating with ghosts of notifications that never came. The family group chat was silent. No apologies, no explanations, just absence. The next morning I had a voicemail waiting. It was my sister's husband. His voice sounded hollow, like he'd already said the words too many times. I filed for divorce, he said. Then he paused. Also, check the drawer by your bed. My stomach dropped. I walked into the bedroom and pulled the drawer open. Empty. My engagement ring was gone. I didn't feel anger the way I expected to. Just numbness. A flat, exhausted acceptance. Of course she'd taken it. She always took what she thought she deserved. I called my husband. He already knew. When he came over later that afternoon, he handed me a small paper bag. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was my ring. She tried to sell it to a friend of mine, he said simply. I bought it back. I didn't know what to say. I held the ring in my palm, feeling its weight, the cold metal grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. I set it on the nightstand instead of sliding it onto my finger. That night felt normal. We ate leftovers at the kitchen counter. My daughter showed him her drawings. She crawled into his lap like nothing had ever been broken between us. He stayed. The ring stayed on the nightstand. Thanksgiving came and went without a single call or message from my family. Instead, I saw photos online. Smiling faces, crowded tables, and one very obvious empty chair. They wanted me to notice it, to feel excluded. I didn't react. I blocked them all. Every number, every account, every group chat. Deleting them felt like pulling out something that had been poisoning me for years. It hurt, but it also felt necessary. Later that evening, my husband showed up with half a pumpkin pie from the grocery store. We made a simple meal, laughed with our daughter, and didn't talk about Facebook or captions or mistakes. After she went to bed, I told him I'd blocked them. He smiled, small and genuine. Good, he said. They tried after that. Fake accounts, screenshots, cruel jokes passed through mutual friends. I didn't respond. I didn't even tell him. Our world had grown quieter, and I wanted to protect it. Slowly, he started fixing things around the house again. A loose cabinet hinge, the leaky faucet, little things that felt bigger than they were. One night, I asked him if he wanted to come home. He didn't hesitate. Yes. He moved back in that weekend. No speeches, no promises we couldn't keep. I shredded the divorce papers and threw them in the trash. Our daughter smiled more. So did I. We weren't perfect, but we were whole. My family still hasn't reached out. They probably never will. And that's okay. They don't get access to my life anymore. They don't get my peace. They don't get my home. And they don't get my child.